Hello, everyone. Welcome to this
Hi.
third session of Beyond Bohm, Science, Order, and Creativity, where we'll be focusing on contemplation and creativity. I'm James Barbieri, Associate Program Director of the Power Center, and I will be your host for today. So any problems, technical or not, feel free to just drop me a message in the chat. Before we begin, I'd just like to very briefly go through a couple of Zoom rules for this session. First of all, if you could please turn off your microphone during the presentation and panel discussion, just to ensure a good quality audio. But at the same time, we do encourage everyone to turn on the cameras. Seeing everyone's faces and reactions creates a nice, inclusive education environment. As per previous sessions, the chat will be disabled to speak to everyone during the presentation and panel discussion, but we will turn it back on during Q&A. When the chat is disabled, you are still able to communicate to us, the hosts. So any problems, just feel free to just message us. And finally, the session is recorded for archival purposes and for you all. The recording will be available on Vimeo after 3 days after the session. And we'll send you all the link. If you haven't received it, just let us know and we can help you out. Okay, so now we can begin today's session. Today we have a very special session, one of the largest panel discussions that the Power Center has ever hosted. We'll be looking at transformation and renewal through Indigenous dialogue. To introduce today's session, we have Lee Nichol, chair of this event, friend and colleague of the late David Bohm. Lee has edited Bohm's books on dialogue, The Essential David Bohm, and on creativity. And with that, over to you, Lee. Welcome.
Thank you, James. And good morning and welcome to everyone. We have a nice number of people joining us today. What I would like to do, a couple of things to get us started. First, I would just like to give a very brief background on how this dialogue came to be and the lineage, so to speak, that this dialogue is part of. I think the best place we could begin is with Leroy Little Bear, that in the late 80s and into the early 90s, Leroy had been reading David Bohm's book, Wholeness and the Implicate Order, which many of you may be familiar with. And in that book, Leroy found many things that were resonant with his Blackfoot view of the world, with the language, with also just the general worldview, I think, that Bohm was presenting with the implicate order. And so Leroy felt, gosh, I would really like to meet this guy and talk to him and see what he thinks about Blackfoot and physics and language and all of these issues. So it was a fortunate set of circumstances that through David Peat, one of the co-founders of the Pari Institute, David Peat was able to link up Leroy and David Bohm. And I think this was in the vicinity of 1990. So we're looking back more than 30 years into the past. And at that time, Leroy and David Bohm and David Peat, sometimes joined by a few others, had some meetings in upstate New York in a place called The Farm. And after those meetings, they all agreed that a larger gathering would be of real value. And so rather quickly, they were able to organize a full-scale dialogue in Kalamazoo, Michigan, sponsored by the Fetzer Institute. And that was a gathering of, I think it was more than 30 people in that dialogue circle, somewhere in that vicinity. And there are people here today that were in that dialogue. Of course, Leroy and his wife, Amethyst, first writer, and Maureen Doolin, the other co-founder of the Pari Institute, was there. And I had the good fortune to be at that dialogue. So that dialogue is a story in itself, but to continue on up to the present, Leroy was determined after that dialogue, because a few months after that dialogue was over, David Bohm passed away. But Leroy was determined to continue with the whole process. And so the dialogues continued for a number of years, sponsored in part by the Banff Center for the Arts in Alberta in Canada. And then there were some dialogues sponsored by the National Science Foundation, a couple of those in Washington, D.C. And then they moved to Albuquerque for over a decade. And those were sponsored by the Seed Institute and Glenn Perry. And that kind of brings us to the present. There was a little bit of a hiatus, actually a considerable gap, since we've had any version of the dialogues. So I think it's worthwhile pointing out that we're really doing an experiment here, that this particular thread of dialogue, this lineage, this group of people, and let me mention all of our core participants today, each and every one of them are woven into the history that I've just kind of briefly explained. All of us have participated in many of these different dialogues through the years. And yet, we're experimenting today. We're doing something that hasn't been done with this particular thread of dialogue, and that is to do it on Zoom. So it will be very intriguing and interesting and an open-ended experiment to see how it all unfolds as we go through today. Let's see, one more thing in that vein. The style of dialogue that we will do today, which was really kind of generated by Leroy, it's something of a hybrid. It's certainly not a pure Bohmian dialogue, and it's certainly not a pure indigenous traditional talking circle. It's a fusion of those elements and then more. Excuse me. So all of these factors keep pointing in this experimental direction that we'll be working with today. Now, I would like to introduce to you all the core group of 8 people that will be in the dialogue today. And I'll begin with David Begay. Good morning, David. We're very happy to have you here with us. David is currently Associate Research Professor at the University of New Mexico in the College of Pharmacy and Community and Environmental Health Programs. He's also Vice President of the Indigenous Education Institute and is a former professor and academic dean at Navajo Nation Diné College. David has worked with the National Science Foundation and NASA for over 20 years and provides cultural and consulting services, both in the United States and internationally. He is considered an elder and tribal leader for the Diné Navajo people and was raised with the deep cultural knowledge, tradition, and language of the Diné people, whose reservation spans parts of Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. And next, I would like to introduce Angelita Valencia Borbon. Angelita, good morning, Angelita, and welcome. Angelita is of the Yaqui people of southern Arizona and northern Mexico. Angelita says to us, I'm living my life paying attention, observing and listening, looking for patterns and feeling resonance. I have a whole world of mentors teaching me what I know and remember. Some say I am like a res dog with a bone, persistent, relentless, and focused. My grandfather told me I am responsible for helping the Sonoran Desert and Los Yaquis survive. My father told me to remember and practice how we think so our people do not forget, and so others may awaken their consciencia dialogue knowing process that we are all connected through our relationship with our Mother Earth and the laws of nature. And did we get Gregory Cajete? Did he make it in? Oh, good. So Gregory's with us. Good morning, Gregory. Good to see you. Greg is a Tewa Indian. Okay, we have his audio now.
Good morning.
Good morning, Greg. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Greg is a Tewa Indian from Santa Clara Pueblo, New Mexico. His work is dedicated to honoring the foundations of Indigenous knowledge in education. For 18 years, Greg was the director of Native American Studies at the University of New Mexico and is professor emeritus in the Division of Language Literacy and Sociocultural Studies at that same institution. Greg is a practicing ceramic, pastel, and metal artist and is a scholar of herbalism and holistic health. He held various positions over 20 years at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe and is the author of 10 books, including Native Science, Natural Laws of Interdependence, and Critical Neurophilosophy and Indigenous Wisdom. And next, we have Amethyst First Rider. Welcome, Amethyst. There she is. Good morning. Amethyst is a member of the Kainai Nation, Blackfoot Confederacy, Alberta, Canada, and is married to Leroy Little Bear. She has been a leader in the performing arts community for more than 20 years, producing and directing plays depicting Aboriginal stories and culture. Amethyst co-conceived Iniskim, an immersive puppet lantern performance celebrating the reintegration of bison into the natural ecosystem of Banff National Park. She is central to the development and success of the Buffalo, a treaty of cooperation, renewal, and restoration, which was signed by over 30 First Nations and tribes in Canada and the USA, the biggest modern treaty amongst First Nations. Amethyst is also a founding advisor to the Kainai Ecosystem Protection Association. And then we go to Rose. Do we have Rose's image? Oh, Rose, good morning. Wonderful to see you. Rose is Tuscarora and is a self-taught artist. Her surrealist figurations explore the exquisiteness of our connections to the earth, expressing the sensuality and intimacy of the natural world as experienced through the human body. Rose is the founding director of the Native American Academy, leading creative projects and transcultural dialogues between Indigenous and Western worldviews to forward the potential for new knowledge using the lens of the Native paradigm, Indigenous learning processes, and Native science. From 1989 to 2000, Rose served as the Director of Education at University of California, Berkeley's Center for Particle Astrophysics. And then we have Nancy. There's Nancy. Good morning, Nancy. Welcome. Nancy is the president and executive director of the Indigenous Education Institute, which is an all Indigenous institution with a mission to preserve, protect, and apply traditional Indigenous knowledge in contemporary settings. Nancy is an affiliate professor at the University of Washington in the School of Environmental Sciences and Forestry. She has been a principal investigator for National Science Foundation projects, including the Cosmic Serpent and Native Universe. Dr. Maryboy is currently a principal investigator for NASA's Space Science Education Consortium. She has written several books and numerous articles on collaboration between Indigenous communities and science centers, with a focus on Navajo astronomy. Dr. Maryboy is Navajo and Cherokee and comes from a family of traditional and medical healers, both on the Navajo Nation and in the Pacific Northwest. And we have Melissa. Welcome, Melissa. Good morning.
Good morning. Good to see you all.
Melissa is a scholar activist and a Native educator. She is formerly a professor of American Indian Studies at San Francisco State University and is now professor of Indigenous Sustainability at Arizona State University. She is the founding executive director of the Cultural Conservancy and currently serves as their president emerita. Melissa is co-editor of Traditional Ecological Knowledge from Cambridge University Press and editor of Original Instructions, Indigenous Teachings for a Sustainable Future. She is Anishanaabe, Metis, Norwegian, and a member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians in North Dakota. And we come to Leroy. Do we have Leroy? Good morning, Leroy. Welcome. Leroy is a Blackfoot native and professor emeritus at the University of Lethbridge in Canada, and is a former director of Native American Studies at Harvard University. He was born and raised on the Blood Indian Reserve, Guyana First Nation, west of Lethbridge, and was a founding member of Canada's first Native American Studies Department. Along with his wife, Amethyst First Rider, Little Bear has brought about the historic Buffalo Treaty between First Nations on both sides of the Canadian-US border. He is co-author of several books on self-government and Aboriginal rights, including Pathways to Self-Determination and Governments in Conflict. Leroy continues to pursue new research interests, including North American Indian science and Western physics, and the exploration of Blackfoot knowledge through songs, stories, and landscape. And with that, Leroy, I'm going to put all of us in your hands as we move forward into the dialogue.
Okay. Si korek sumatsunok po noch skanato ne. Iksi ko muksta iksi puyo pi. Knasuk skatsik. Pukex takitapitsta. Nisto na kaukikas kiniwa inaksix kanawa saukitapio. Era no tapi kakutskanokipo. I introduced myself as in my Blackfoot name, Lowhorn. I'm of the Small Robes clan of the Blood Indian tribe Guyana, and we're of the Blackfoot Confederacy. So maybe some of you are my relatives out there, you know. I start our dialogue. I have ran many of the dialogues that Lee has referred to. And just briefly, hopefully some of you that are actually going to be participating in the dialogues will remember the instructions I usually give at the beginnings of the dialogues that we've had in the past. And that is, hey, let's take off all our shields. Let's take off all those tacit infrastructures that we walk around with on a daily basis and so on. Let's empty some of our cups so that, you know, there'll be room for new knowledge and so on. And so that we can really listen to each other about what we're talking about, because dialogue includes listening. So often in our daily lives, when we're conversing, we only listen half of the time because we're thinking on the other half about our comeback, about what we're going to say to the person that we're conversing with. But in this case, in dialogues, hey, we want full attention to what somebody is saying. Okay. So with that, let's just take a moment and erase all those things off of us that I refer to as shields, tacit infrastructures, so that we will have a clean slate for our dialogue. And while you're doing that, I will say an opening prayer, short opening prayer for our dialogue. Ayushtipatapio pa na tu si kumiki sumakak. Hindi kimukina noxistikoy kakao noktak si puy pinana which kanomia stimstanesti kanomia si iksu kuampusin nanesti ni teksu kuampusim pimatapio manistaska takipanakar kanomia si tapio kak tasaku utistapi tutsi pinan. Kentaksi tu tukana tu pinan mo kananistape tu pinana masi nuchte nuchtsuet isuk sukum utsi iksukum pinanisse musikane suka pikaneta mixamstan kanekach pika pian setakits pia po kakpinan kispumu kinana noxisikoy kak takana nestape puti sinanyam sepuma pi sepumixamstana pi hannese noxkato penoxisikoy kak Mr. Piputumu kinana mukististum sinekak kipastimi sinekak taksi taksochtes sinuts pinanaxi stapiwa muktakswo kutsi pinat. Misami peta piuxanina piu sinita mistawat semane hennese noxishkato penoxisikoikak. In my style of leading these dialogues, I usually throw out a question to our participants to begin and kind of break the ice, so to speak. And I never tell anybody ahead of time what the question is going to be. Okay, because if I do, then everybody will be ready, getting ready for it. And in fact, bring in all their biases and beliefs and, shields and so on when we come to the actual question. So consequently, I never tell anybody ahead of time. Not even the Amethyst knows what I'm going to be asking and so on. So to begin our dialogue, I would like to, have each of you give, I will throw out the question and have each of you speak to in very brief form to the question. I'll go around in a circle, and once everybody's had their say, then we can go as to anybody. I'll give the floor to anybody that wants to continue. But to kind of break the ice for the very beginning part of it, I'll go around in a circle to speak about and respond to the question. Here goes. But before I throw that out, I thought I would tell you, and some of you may have heard about this, about two antennas. I think one was Navajo, and I think the other antenna was from one of the pueblos. They met on the street and said, "Hey, I haven't seen you in a long time. How about a reception?" So
Leroy.
Here goes. Imagine, and here's the scenario. Imagine you're at a youth camp, a science youth camp, okay? And you have invited a physicist, a scientist, to come to your youth camp. Okay, but you are the elder at the youth camp, and the camp is pretty well over, and we're now doing the closing circle, so to speak, at the youth camp. Okay, and you want to give the participants in the youth camp one final lesson, one final teaching you want them to take away from the youth camp. And your scientist is there listening. My question is, what would be that final teaching that you would want the youth, the boys and the girls in the youth camp, to take away? I'll start with our host, Lee.
I was afraid of that. I think I would put the physicist on the spot, and I would ask the physicist if through his knowledge or her knowledge, if she or he could convey to the youth group, in what way is the earth that we're all standing on right now, in what way is that connected to the stars? Can you, as a physicist, share your view of that? I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. Good thought. So on. And that's a big vision that person would have to really think about. Let me go to Rose, going around. Yeah.
On it. Lee did a big thing now, and now I have to try and figure something out. Okay. I think I would ask him or her to speak to the way in which our knowledges, the different world views of science. I'd like to have that person speak to the importance of bringing those worldviews into a harmony, and to recognize that the potential for complementarity is inherent. And how would that person bring that forward so that the children could have a full education?
Yeah, okay. Nancy.
I was afraid I was going to be next as I heard you talk about going around in a circle. And I just want to first say I'm so blessed and happy to have my sister Rose here. This is just wonderful. Thank you for making the effort to be here with us. Yes. First, I guess I'd like to know who the students are. Are they all Native American? Are they all non-Indigenous, or are they a mixture of the two? And that would have something to do with how I would address them. I think as the elder, as you said, we are the elder. I guess I would speak from my heart to the Indigenous youth there, just as a matter of interrelationship, really, and wanting them to go away with a great trust in the knowledge of their own heritage, and keep searching for who they are and who they are as a human in living on this planet that we're living on. And I think I would have them search deeply within themselves and go back to their own elders for constant reinforcement and more information. And really, that's all I can say at this point. I want to see how this evolves.
Okay, good thoughts. Melissa.
Good morning, Puju, everyone. So happy to be here with you all. I would ask the physicist to talk about our relationship to light, really kind of what Lee was talking about with starlight, and seeing how their understanding of physics has made them more connected to the universe, and by that, more connected to the earth, and really helping the youth understand that we are not alone and that we are constantly connected, and that physics is catching up to Indigenous ways of knowing about that, and affirming, like Nancy said, Indigenous ways of knowing the universe, that physics can be our ally, and understanding that interconnectedness to make us feel whole and that we belong.
Yeah. And I know the buffalo would play in the background and so on.
Yes. Yeah.
David, your thoughts?
I'm up.
Yes. Yes, you
That's
look
good.
so good. I had to call on you.
Yeah. Well, not only did I get old, I might look a little wiser, but that doesn't mean, you know, something wise is going to come out of my mouth. Might be going the other way. I think there's a lot of talk about bringing the whole world back to order. You know, right now everybody's talking about climate change. You know, there's something that we experience everywhere, including the native people, and it's an international problem right now. And people are always looking at the pieces, and they speak, their words speaks of the pieces of the universe. And most of the time they talk about the present, not looking at the past, not looking at the future. And so using my own Native American consciousness that when you think in that language, it's the past is connected to the present, and the present will be connected to the future unless something happens. And so, you know, we're always talking about, you know, we are our ancestors, you know, this is the past. We are, we are the energy of the past, you know, and matter at this time, you know, and we're going to go back to the energy when we leave here. It's the Native American way of thinking. So, how can physicists use their scientific knowledge in the world of holism? Everything moves at the same time. Can help with our climate change. Because, you know, some of the words that physicists use, like David Bohm, the holo movement, you know, he talks about everything moving at the same time. They're not separate. They're all moving at the same time. You know, we have words, you know, it's an ancient, you know, way of thinking in the native world. So, you know, a lot of these words that David Bohm talks about, you know, the holistic ness of all things, the implicate order, it's old thinking for native people. And so I guess for me, thinking out of the box, I've always been in that box. And so, you know, I'll be speaking from that box for me. Anyway, that's my question, you know, how can you physicists help with their knowledge? It seems to me that they're speaking some of the native way of thinking. There's some commonality.
Greg, good to see you. You're on mute.
I said, good to see you also. Good to see all of you. As I'm looking at all your faces, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, how young we all look. I remember when you were all young people asking these same questions
over and over again.
Over and over again. Yes. So again, it's really a pleasure to see all of your faces and to connect with you in this way, this very interesting and strange way to connect that we've all been thrown into during this time of very challenging times, you know. And as I'm listening to each of your responses, I'm thinking you know, that for me, my question, you know, really has to do with kind of the most ancient question is what, and Melissa is a part of this metaphor. What kind of ancestor do you want to be? And her very, very beautiful work, you know, with others in addressing that dialogue, that question. You know, everything is connected. We are related. We are related. We are related. Relationship, relationship, relationship. That's the indigenous, you know, thought process. And so past is related to present, is related to future in this holographic diagram of the universe as it plays out at multiple levels, from the cosmic to the particle physics, you know, of energy and matter. And so I think that my question would be, how do you bring an understanding of that relationship, that intimate relationship, to the next generation who's going to need it, and to understand that very deeply and very profoundly in ways that they never have, and unfortunately in ways that our current education systems, our current institutions, our current political systems don't know how to teach. Indeed, our elders had these understandings and these perspectives in all tribes for literally thousands of years, and they came to these understandings by having dialogue with themselves and with the natural world. It is deeply embedded in a deep and intimate understanding and dialogue with the natural world. And so these thoughts and these perspectives certainly emerged, you know, from that listening and from that understanding and that perspective. And so today we call this traditional ecological knowledge, but of course, you know, it is ancient knowledge. It is knowledge that we have language for, that our elders talked about. Some of us forgot, you know, that language. Some of us never got taught that language as a result of colonization. Many of us as Indigenous people are trying to reclaim that part of our heritage and emerge it and move it further forward. But I think it's a question of our time and our survival, our survivance as a human species. So the physicist must also look at, I think, their biases, their Western biases, the Western bias of science, and the bias of Western culture as a whole, as it has not allowed other thoughts into the realm of their thinking, and now is faced with the real predicament of having challenges that are essentially systemic and holographic, unfolding in the form of climate change, and really not really understanding how to deal with it, how to work with it. And so we're, I think, at a very, very important time. And what we transfer to the next generation, I think, has to be something of a wisdom that we are trying to claim, you know, for our time, for our place, but certainly is going to be essential into the future.
Wonderful thoughts and so on. Amethyst.
Okay, it's okay. I would tell my youth that we've been in camp for a few days, and that hopefully they saw the idea of relationships in the camp and what that's all about. I'm starting to understand, as becoming an elder in my community, that we really are the seeders, and we plant the new seeds of knowledge and pass them and water them and nurture them to our youth. And it's pretty hard, because one of the things you first understand when you start looking back in that traditional knowledge is you start to look at soil and how healthy the soil is, and how it's the beginning of our creation story. It was the soil created the earth, and that earth needed love, relationship, and seeds to grow. And so the journey then becomes showing our youth about how to seed and how to nurture and how to look at our plants and how we need the water and the sky and the stars and all that relationship that is contained in our traditional stories. So again, traditional stories become a great knowledge keeper for our youth. My best way, and it's been interesting in that working with people from different institutions, whether they be physicists, we're now doing work with food sovereignty. We're looking at technical schools that are saying, we're not well, how do we get well? And so one of the things that we've done is we take them out on the land. And I just finished a teaching with a large school in Calgary called SAIT. It's a technical school, and it has a culinary program. The culinary program said, we have large numbers of natives, and we're teaching them French cooking, we're teaching them Italian cooking, but we're not teaching them indigenous foods. And so we got asked the task of looking at indigenous foods. And the best way that we could do it was we took them out the land. And we took them on the land, and we have a Nappies garden out on the reserve, very humble little garden. And we realized our traditional plants have been endangered through agriculture. And we have to now nurture those traditional plants and get them healthy. But the most simple thing we did was bring them on the land, treat them with the kindness our elders teach us, to work with other people. And we took them berry picking. And we just told them, let's go get some Saskatoon berries. And Saskatoon berries are the keystone berry of the Blackfoot people. We make soups and jams and medicine. And this little city girl went out and dried her berries for tea. But the people really, after being on the land, they were just amazed and they were so happy. And that's what seeding does, is that you plant those seeds and you hope they grow. And so it is with great humbleness that we're starting to be able to help do the seeding. And I'm looking at my sisters, and Melissa, I already how can I say it? Asked her for seeds, and Rose to send me seeds, and Nancy to seeds, Greg, because it's our youth that want to go on the land and plant. The physicists are amazed when they're on the land because they've never been probably on the land. They've been in some academic office. And so to be able to see what happens on land is really important. So I'll quit there, and may you gather many seeds and throw them in the sky and have them drop to be planted. Thank you.
I stole some of those berries and I ate them. Yeah. And Angelita.
Oh, I just love listening to everybody. And then I guess I'm thinking about fragrant desert rains right now. And I'm gathering you all and taking you into this place of fragrant desert rains and words that are dancing between us. And I'm so happy and grateful to be alive with you on this screen here today. So I just wanted to start by saying that. And I think as the grandmother elder who's at this youth camp,
I might say something about, this is not your usual camp. We're not going to sing Kumbaya, we're not going to all say, oh, let's have some insights together and be happy about all the things that we learned, Kumbaya, and go home and everything business as usual. Those are other camps, but that's not this camp. And I think maybe I would say that if it's really beautiful to step outside of either or. So hopefully at no time during this camp did anyone feel like they had to listen to the physicist and say, oh yeah, I'm like him or her. And then listen to the grandmother and say, oh yeah, I'm like him or her. Or make a choice that our summer camp was about being whole. And that's why we studied David Bohm and all these other people. And part of being whole is learning about the both and, so that we can learn to think the way we have thought, Indigenous people have thought for centuries, which is not to divide things into yes and no, or good and bad, but to bring things, all the parts together into both and ands, and how they all are in relationship, as you all have spoken to so beautifully. And I think that this idea would sort of tumble into science, Western science, needing to have subject experts. And that maybe if they go to school, we're sending our youngest, strongest, brightest warriors into the academies, and they might get tripped up into thinking that they need to become subject experts. And so as youth, I would want them to hold the idea of expertise. And that maybe I, as a grandmother with lots of stories, and as a midwife, having been with a lot, gosh, I'm old, probably 1,000 women giving birth, I have an expertise that I speak from. I've read lots of books, but their grandmother, when they go home, maybe they can start to look at her in a little bit of a different way and see that grandmother is the professor of the culture and the family. She holds a lot of information, and she is somebody to be in relationship with, maybe in a new way after this science camp. Because science is about surviving and knowing how to make 3 good meals out of 1 chicken. It's about keeping our culture intact. In Spanish, you say, she's buena educada, she's well educated. It has nothing to do with college degrees. It means that she's been schooled and held accountable to the cultural mores and protocols that the extended family is bringing her up in. And this is all science. And so I guess my closing wish to them was to go forth and in their own way change science, make it sustainable, make it full of us and what we know, and grandmothers. No grandmother left behind.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Geez, I've really heard some really good things to my, to my question and so on. And I hear you talking about relationships, okay? I hear you talking about, the science and so on. And I heard you talking about the earth and so forth. let me combine a couple things, and in fact, some of the things that you people have said. Let me throw them out there, and any one of you can speak to that. And that is, what kind of, I think one of you says, what kind of elder do you want to be? Combine it with the notion, because many of you spoke about, I should say, the notion of light. The notion of light. What is light? In my language, in Tewa, in Cree, and so on, in English, what is light? Combine that with the notion of what kind of elder do I want to be? Ready? Anybody that wants to speak to that?
Okay. I'll
Rose.
go, Lee. I'll go, Leroy. As I listened to everybody speaking, what became clear is, the consensus of care and relationship, and certainly the immediate thoughts about science and climate change and re-nourishing our beloved mother. But the element in that, it's almost as like that's the second thing we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
We have the first thing is the bringing of the light. And if you use the words quality of consciousness as a descriptor of the light, because I think that what creates that exquisite moment when Amethyst has those kids picking berries is that they are in relationship, which means they are conscious. They're conscious of the energies and the animateness and the aliveness. They are alive within the aliveness. They experience it. And when we talk about sending our children, the best and the brightest off to the colleges, Melissa, David, Greg, Nancy, all of you, we've all shared how, it's a knife edge walk. How do we bring them to the reality that they can embody a quality of consciousness that allows them to know many different ways of knowing? I think that that's the key. It's the quality of their consciousness, because you can see it. I just had a huge experience in a Western institution. I was in a hospital for 9 days, and it was, they were doing every single thing they could to help me. They were beautiful, committed, dedicated people. And yet it was when one of my beautiful Yaqui brothers came and sang to me that I came back and remembered what was real. So there's what we create, which is Western thought, and there's reality, which is what we are and what we live in. And to be able to display that, to be an example of embodying that, that's the elder I want to be.
Beautiful, beautiful. Nancy.
I love what you said, Rose, just so much. And I just want to illustrate it with a story or two. My brother, Kenneth Maryboy, was in the hospital in Salt Lake, and he was going down really fast. And, you know, it's like in Native families, you all try to be, lots of you try to be there. And you have to kind of fight the administration to let everyone that wants to be there in the door, because they're all part of the healing. But there too, the doctors were very good and they were doing everything they could, but it wasn't helping. And then everything changed. Okay, what changed it? One of the things, the most major one that I remember, is that our mom, who was back down on the Navajo reservation, said he needs some water. He needs water from here, is what she said. And so we always listened to her. And so we had somebody, you know, get the water and prepare it and bring it up really fast. And it's a long drive from Bluff, Utah to Salt Lake. And so when the water got there and it was sprinkled on him, and believe me, he was going down fast. It was like we were sprinkling life or light onto him, and he started to breathe again, and he had this smile on his face. And right at that moment, he put his hands out like this to receive more of that water, and right then is where the healing continued to blossom. And from then on, he was getting better. And so it was something, to tie this into what a lot of you have been saying, it was something directly from the land. And with hindsight of a couple of years now, the land of drought, it was that precious, precious life-giving water. And he could feel it, and he could feel how it came into his body through his hands. And it was a moment I'll never forget, because it was such a strong teaching. And it was actually done long distance. You know, she got the water, she prayed over it, and it came up to Salt Lake. So this idea of healing and becoming whole again is so intimately connected with the land and the water and the light. Light is expressing all of those things, the life-giving force and the light-giving force. And I also want to share you one other story, and this was from a sort of a camp when we put on the iWise conference in Albuquerque. And we had a big youth contingent that was being run by Burley Ann Molina Wright and Isabel Hawkins and Shelley Valdez. And at the end, and there were a lot of National Science Foundation officers there, and at the one we did later in Washington, D.C. And the officers were so excited about what the youth had to offer, but it was inverted. This is the kind of elder youth I think I'd like to be, is teachings that the National Science Foundation scientists were seeing the teachings in the framework of them being able to do something for the kids. They kind of lost track of the real point of this. And they set up a conference for a lot of these students to attend. And of course, this is one of the things that's always hard when you get into the science world is people start pushing a pipeline on you that you're going to go to college and you're going to go to graduate school and you're going to become a professor, and you are implicit in that is you are going to leave your land and your people. And that's what the communities do not like to see. And so they offered this big session just for the youth. And it was really amazing because these are youth that are gardening on their own lands in Laguna and in Lakota land. And they are intimately working with the land, and they don't want to take time out. Even they do go to college, but not totally willingly. They want to learn from their elders why their elders are still alive to teach them. And so they turned down the talk that was so precious in the Western world to have these people's attention. And they said, we're not interested, and we are interested in being on our own land, learning from our own people. It was a tremendous learning moment for a lot of us that these youth stood up so strongly to say that. And it was a shock, a real shock to the officers at NSF. And I think in the years after, they've thought about it a lot. I'm not sure I'm not sure where it's taken them in their own consciousness, but I know every one of us that heard these youth stand up was really moved by it. And we're just so proud of them. And I have so much faith in our youth. And every time I hear them talking about these things, and it goes back to the land, and it goes back to the interrelationships and what they're learning from the grandmothers and grandfathers and how precious it is. And they feel it stronger and stronger, you know, all the time. And I'm surrounded by it up here in the Northwest, even though I'm not back down on my homeland right now. But gosh, Lummi and Swinomish and these wonderful young people at Northwest Indian College, that problem hasn't been solved yet. How do you get the credentials that these youth could need, but get them in a native way that is really going to be important to them? And yet all the funding and all the big titles and everything are coming from Western institutions. Now I'm thinking there's a lot of hope, like with people like Melissa, they're now going into a new position at a big university. I'm handing this problem over to you.
I need your help. I need your help. I'll do my best, Nancy. You've been guiding the way, all of you.
Yeah. Thoughts, Angelita?
You know, I think the realization that I am becoming an elder just hit me. I feel really young at 72, but it hit me because I have been part of a nuclear extended family that has raised this beautiful young man. And he invited me to participate. My grandson was graduating from a college in New England, and he was doing his thesis report. I guess you have to defend your thesis before you can graduate with Latin, I guess they call it. So all of this was sort of new to me, but I listened to this defense of his thesis, and I really didn't understand that much, but I was watching his professors that were evaluating him. And I listened to 3 other people that did it. And the last part of it was acknowledgements. And the other 3 people had said, you know, I really want to acknowledge my mentor, blah, 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 whatever, real fast. Well, my grandson had a whole page of acknowledgements. And it started with his mother and his father and his grandmother, me, my whole name. And it just kept going down. And it was like, it was like multiple acknowledgements, like 2 columns of acknowledgements of his friends who had read that, you know, I mean, he named them. He took the time to say their full name and to name what they did. And then it went all down, and I kept watching the professor shifting, you know, in their seats, like, oh my God, what's going on here? And at the end, it was, you know, and all my relations and the creator. And I went, oh my gosh, that's data, that's evidence to me that he is part of our community and knows how to be in relationship and how to honor relationship, and that he's not just succeeding on his own in an individual way. Well, he was accepted into a PhD program in neuroscience at the Johns Hopkins University Medical School. And he's there now in Baltimore. And when he was accepted, I was like, wow, is that where he wanted to go? And that was his first choice. That's where he wanted to go. And I was asking him about the interviews, and he said one of his professors who interviewed him, it was 2 or 3 days of interviews, had asked him what native science was. And I said, did you put that somewhere in your personal statement? And he said, yes. And I said, how did you answer that question from your professor? What is Native science? And he says, I said, it's the way I was raised.
Mhm. Mhm.
So this just to really piggyback off what Angelita and Nancy have said, you know, I've just retired from the University of New Mexico, and I certainly have taught thousands of students, most of which have been Native students, and again they echo those sentiments of connection and really a longing to reconnect, you know, to who they are, their identity, their people, their lands. I'm reminded that when I was going to college, I had the good fortune to spend a summer with some northern New Mexico activists, both Native and Hispanic activists who were working in community settings in northern New Mexico. And we used at that time a term called bringing to the light. It was also in Spanish, it was called La Resalana, which is really about a historical practice that was shared by both Pueblo and Hispanic communities there in northern New Mexico. So, you know, we're coming to the time when you know, harvests are being brought in. This is the time of year when we're collecting, you know, the fruits of our labor, you know, from our fields. And there'll be a time of harvest and celebration. And then there'll be a time when everything that work has been done, and there'll be like a lull in the cycle, where the afternoons will or the days will get shorter, and the mornings will be cold, but the afternoons will be kind of warm. And during those times, both in Hispanic and Pueblo villages, the people would gather on the outside of their houses, usually facing the south, and they would talk about things that mattered to them. They would have dialogue. So dialogue is not just the Western thing, okay? So it was practiced in some very direct and real ways, in which they told stories, in which they told their history, in which they discussed the problems of the day, and in which they reinforced, you know, that relationship, that key foundational relationship that is required to survive, you know, from one generation to the next. And so that idea of relationality is reinforced in this very special kind of way of doing community, in which people, you know, once again gathered to bring light, gathered in the light in the afternoon to discuss those things that matter to them. And so that really, for me, you know, connects to the all importance of community and the essential nature of community and understanding community, because we're communal beings. As human beings, we are wired for community. We're social beings. We have to depend on each other. So relationship is the key to that. This is something that is not taught in our universities, in our schools. As a matter of fact, it's shunned in many cases, you know, because of the focus on individuality. And again, I think that having spent so many years with Native and non-Native students, I see that in our young people, there's a great hunger, you know, to get back to that sense of community, that sense of bringing light, both to their lives and also to who they are as human beings, you know, in this constellation of relationship after relationship after relationship. So I just want to bring that story out, is that, you know, for me, coming from a communal culture, and also, you know, having at least that one summer where I worked with like minds, you know, as we looked at the issues in a Native community, in a Hispanic community, that was able to bring forward, to help me to remember what was actually very important for me in my later years, and I think has contributed to to this time of coming into elderhood as we now share our information, share our knowledge, and share our experience with the next generation.
Thoughts? Okay.
Oh.
Melissa.
Right. Great. When I had the good honor of co-editing this collection of stories of people grappling with the question, what kind of ancestor do you want to be? It was so funny because Amethyst, when I wrote a little chapter for it and I said, I want to be like cranberries. So connecting back to you. And when you look at our Anishanaabe and our indigenous language of berries, deep in the root of the word berry is gift, medicine from the land. The min, mashkiki min, it is a medicine from the land. Just like manomen, our wild rice, is also a gift from the land, a medicine from the land that is in the form of food. And so that to be a medicine for each other in community is such an important part. And so I want to be an ancestor that is like a berry that can nourish the people. And I even said sometimes in drought, they're kind of mealy and not so good and they have insects in them. And, you know, it depends on the conditions of the water and the conditions of the soil, as you mentioned. So to be a juicy berry, you know, that's a special thing. And it takes a lot of different factors of Mother Earth to create that. But to be like a berry, to be a gift and a medicine from the earth, to continue to nourish each other, I think is so important. So I wanted to share that. And then this reflection, as Uncle Leroy says, what does it mean to be an ancestor and how is that connected to light? And, you know, physicists talk about this wave particle duality, right? And that photons can be individuals or particles, but they can also be waves and motion and movement and the whole concept of entanglement. So it seems that when we are alive human beings, embodied human beings, we have that individuality, the sovereignty of our beings, yet we are interdependent and interrelated. And when we become an ancestor after the body goes back to the earth, our spirit is like a wave, and like the light then becomes the wave. So that just came to me while we were together in dialogue, that the spirit of a person is like that light in that duality and that complementariness of particle and wave. And it seems that even though when someone dies, we often say the light goes out, but the light doesn't go out. The light explodes, right? It becomes part of that starlight and becomes part of those star camps that we look at in the night sky. So those were some of my musings on your great question about the relationship between ancestors and light and berries and medicine. Miigwech.
Fantastic. Amethyst.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa, for those nourishing berries. I just wanted to do a little story kind of reflecting from Nancy's perspective about youth. And in our Blackfoot way, we don't have a designated even elder. Very often our young people are blessed to have knowledge transmitted to them in dream or vision. And they teach us also, you know. But when we were out in Harvard, we had, you know, students, and Leroy and I were going to go out towards New Mexico, and we had some Navajo students, and we told them, we're going to go to Albuquerque. Is there anything you want? You know, you want us to bring you back something, you know, thinking food or something. And they said, can you just bring us back a rock? And I said, a rock? And they said, yes. And when we brought that rock back, they were very happy because they could smell their land in the rock. And that rock is light. And that so they could feel, they put it on their cheek and they could feel the light and the warmth from the land, and they could smell the land. And I just thought, oh, they could have had anything, but they just wanted that rocks because they were getting lonesome for their land. And so very often we're so connected with rock, and rock is really a combination of consciousness and waves and particles. And if we're observant, those rocks will always nourish us. And we go out to our medicine wheels, and I've been so interested in the fungi on the rocks, and in the Blackfoot way, when you see those red, it's like out on the desert, and on those rocks is that fungi growing, and in beautiful patterns and beautiful colors. And our people say that's the spirit's beadwork on those rocks. And so
Oh, lovely.
always beautiful teachings. And so it makes you happy to see that the spirits make our world so beautiful. And so I think that consciousness is about vibration and being able to understand. And just one last little thing about from the skies and the cosmology and the stars is a wonderful story about how the rattle are rocks from our stars, and that's what we connect with. And so those rattles embody starlight. And so even in ceremony, when we use our rattles, we're working with light. We're creating medicine with light.
Yeah, beautiful thoughts and so on, stories, etc. Anybody else want to speak to what kind of a elder I want to be, combined with the notion about what's light all about? Yeah, David.
What kind of an elder I want to be? I want to be grow to be 102 years old, and
yeah, me too.
Sense of humor all the way to the end. And I don't think this question has anything to do with, I want to be continue to be David Begay that I am, and I think this is a big question, combined in elder and the notion of light. You put it together, and what do you think? Kind of question. And so, it kind of takes me back to one of my science course some years back. The science teacher was dividing up different resources like fire and water. On the one side, it had abiotic, and the other side had biotic. And in the abiotic, light was considered dead, not alive. And it's just a resource. And so in that science classroom, we're talking about light as life. It's not quite recognized. So I always wonder how much of an impact that would have on people that think like me. I always think that light is life. And I know in the native world and other indigenous world that I've talked to around the world, they all say that light is life. And in using my stories, my traditional stories, words that I've heard, that I've been told that you are light. There's a word that people use the tsuyo, so the energy that was there from the beginning was light. It's what everything emerged from there, one holistic energy. And from that process, this process preceded everything. This process turns into matter, turns into something. And so it's like ongoing. And for us today, this is how we look. In the future, this energy where this light is going, we don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know what life is going to look like. That seems to be the understanding. And that, we are light. We're starlight. Totally. We're light from the sun. We're totally that. Light from the moon. We're totally that. So medicine, it's a process. We are a process. We're just a mere process. So you can come to the realization that that you're a part of this much bigger process. It's ancient. So in this word, Satsuyo, it's my ancient relation from which I came, that connecting the past to the present. I am the past, I am the present, and where this lies going, I'll be the future. So conscious thought and realizing, not talking about it like in an academic setting, really coming to the realization that you are light, not just be there when you say it, but actually living it. I think using Rose's word, that she said, the embodiment, that light, experiencing the natural world, the light, experience through the human body. It's like, it's not a metaphor, it's the real thing. And so that knowledge, when you go into the science classroom, youth going into the science classroom, there's going to be some restriction. So you go into the science classroom, there's some things that you have to, that you're expected not to say. And you talk their language. But once outside, going back into the community, the Native American community, the language is different there. And so you talk that language when you go back over there. And so, this whole process, like Melissa was saying, we understand in our language, there's these waves, we have words for those. There's these frequencies, and and there's from the also vibration. We have those words, much similar to how science talks about these things. So I guess, taking the understanding of light in a traditional mind and passing on that knowledge and combining it and teaching it from a native perspective. So that's the combination that I tried to do here. Thank you for allowing me the time.
Thanks so much. Wonderful thoughts. I was just wanting to give everybody a chance to say anything. I wish you wouldn't talk so much, Lee. Any thoughts on that?
Well, a couple of things. Yes, thank you, Leroy. Thank you, everyone. I'm just kind of feeling wrapped up in everybody's blanket. It's so beautiful to hear all these words. Well, what kind of elder would I want to, what kind of ancestor would I want to be? One thing that occurred to me, because it's my own experience, is that if as an elder or as an ancestor, I'll just wait a second here. Okay, that was a helper there. If I left something of value as an elder or an ancestor, and the young ones that came along recognized some value in that, I would hope that they would at some point ask themselves, if I was a grandmother, they would say, how did she come to that? And they would think about that. Or if I was a grandfather, how did he live that he came to that value and found a way that I've now got it, right? So that the young ones, they wouldn't just receive something of value, but they would be curious as to how that came to the grandmother or the grandfather. What was given to them? What was before them? How did they live their life that they were able to bring that further to life and then give it to me? And then what do I do with it to see that whole movement and feel it in whatever it was of value that was passed on from that elder? So in a way, how would that connect to light? I think is very much what Rose was saying, that consciousness is light. And many people have pointed this out. David was just saying many wonderful things about this. So to receive something of value like that from an elder or an ancestor, and then to really open the depth of one's being to how that is transmitted and renewed and regenerated, there's light in that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me add to this. These thoughts from a Blackfoot perspective about what kind of an elder ancestor would I want to be, and the notion about light. In Blackfoot, the notion of light really speaks to being. It speaks to being, and it speaks to beauty. Nutsi in Blackfoot is light. And it speaks to, it's the same as beauty. And so when I'm thinking about what kind of an ancestor, what kind of an elder I would want to be, well, I guess it would be spreading the beauty. Yeah. It'll be spreading the beauty. Yeah. And when we look past into these backgrounds that some of you have, and like the rocks, the buffalo, and so on, hey, those are all so beautiful. Those are about beauty. And it comes back to the notion about the land and so on, and all the relational networks, webs of relationships that we keep referring to, and so on. I know we can keep moving on to this, but in looking at the our time, and I wish we were able to go on all day, because I know we would have some really beautiful thoughts and ideas to share if we were able to go longer. But let's take just a couple, 3 minutes break if any of us need to go to a restroom or get a drink and someone come right back. We have a treat for you that Rose, produced for us and so on, and it's a 7-minute clip, if you can call, if you can think about a 7-minute presentation. We'd like to share that with you. Once that's over, then we'd like to, the rest of the time, we'd like to spend a little bit of time with our other participants. We want you to stay on hand because any one of those participants might ask you a question and so on. Yeah, so let's take a quick 2-minute, 3 minutes at the most, break to go get a drink or go to the restroom and so on, and be right back. Yeah, okay. And we'll have James put on get the little clip on that Rose has done for us. Yes.
Thank you, Leroy. Yes, let's come back all at 40 minutes past the hour.
Yes. When Amethyst was talking about the rocks, one of our neighboring First Nations over here just to the north of us, they're of Nakota and descent and little mixture of Cree and so on, but they're known as the Stonies. And whenever I see my friends from the Stonies, I ask them about when they're going to be putting on a rock festival. Yeah.
Rock on.
Yeah. While we were at the camp that Amethyst and we were at, there was a little, we were using a camper, and the steps, you can lay the steps down at the back of the camper, but they were still too high so they put a little stump log at the bottom to make it so that one of our grandmas can step on the log onto the step and so on. And we got these young kids, where we were at, there was no Wi-Fi, no cellular service. So we had a captive audience. So I was sitting there with them and asked them, do you know why we have that log over there at the bottom of the steps? And of course they said, oh, it's to make it so that, our grandma can get into the camper. And I said, no, you got it all wrong. And they said, what do you mean? I said, you got it all wrong. That log is there so that when grandma wants to go into the camper, she can log in and then log out, Yeah. So are we ready with the presentation, James?
Yes, I'll start sharing now.
Yeah. Let's let it roll.
As we all know, recently there was the discovery among the Western world of the mass graves of Native children who had been stolen and taken to boarding schools up in British Columbia and throughout Canada and North America, throughout the United States as well. And with that first stunning discovery, there are 215, they counted. It was a reopening of a brutal wound for Native people, and an in-your-face experience of inhumanity for the world. And so all of us everyone was impacted. Everyone that heard of it allowed themselves to even consider it. And the first thing that happened for me, after the pain was, or along with the pain was, okay, so what is this? Why now?
Apologies.
Obviously, the indigenous mind is not rising, it has risen and continues to grow fuller and fuller. And what I experienced, what I saw, was that the purpose of this coming forth now is that it is the spirits of those, 4,000, 5,000, how many thousand? Children rising to transform the consciousness of the world, because that is their power, that is their ability. Children, those children, that was their sacrifice, that was their gift. That's what, they went through that, so that now we can take that. And what we have to do, or what I believe, is that we have within our beings the capacity to transform poison into medicine. I've had personal experience. I was embedded in the physics community for 11 years, where if you mentioned the word native science, people either ran screaming from the room, or, they didn't burn me at the stake, but that didn't mean they didn't want to. And how do you do that? How do you transform a poison of that potency into medicine? I think that, after the first shock and the first burning down of churches and the first fury and the first release and the first denials, you allow yourself to begin to dig into it, to find the answers. Find the answers to your humanity. What do we do? How do we go about living as good people? That knowledge is in there. How do you decide to step away from your prejudices and your embedded worldview to consider, just consider, like, not own it or agree with it or like it, but to consider that another's values are equal to your own, and that you are related, and that what was done to those children were done to your children and was done to you. I did a couple of paintings. Do you want to see those?
Yes.
They're small, and they said for me what the purpose of this is. And you know, again, it wasn't as though I did something so wonderful. These were just given to me to do. Unfortunately, you know, I had the materials and the time. This is the first one. And this is the spirit of 215 Native children rise from their mass grave to transform the world consciousness, to allow us to be humans together and to renew our relationship with the earth and the whole. So this was the first one. And the second one that came was kind of the response, you know, and you can see that the spirits are stronger. They're emitting even more elements, and you can see the fury and the upset and all of the anguish and all of the denial and all of the horror of it. But if you look, you can see the beauty of what is possible, the beauty of what can come now. But we have to do it. It's not a government program. And this is the final one that I had that I consider, and these are the prayers. This is the calling in of all that we need to turn that poison into medicine. We just need to reach for it.
To a large extent, I guess, it speaks to that question about what kind of an elder, what kind of an ancestor do I want to be? Yeah. And the light that might be out there that we deal with, that is part of our very being, and which without we could not and would not exist. I know that a lot of us, I know Angelita had something to say, but in the remaining moments of our dialogue, I'd like to engage some of our participants and ask if they have any questions and comments and so on to make to any of our participants in the dialogue. We'd welcome that. So I'll let James kind of control that part of our dialogue. James.
Thank you, Leroy. Yes, we can open up to participants now. If you'd like to ask a question, if you could please use the raise your hand function on Zoom. It can be found at the bottom of your screen under reactions. Or if you're feeling shy, you can ask your question in the chat and I can read it out for you if you like. The first question or comment will come from Carol.
Thank you. And thank you to all the participants. Everything you've said has resonated so deeply and really affirmed the path that I've been on for a long time and buoyed me with the understanding that certainly I'm not alone, and there are teachers out there that I can learn from. I've learned much from you all today. But in that vein, I'm curious if any of you can tell me where or how I can connect with the work you're doing, so that it will bring me more clarity in the work that I continue to do in bringing consciousness. I'm an artist, but I'm bringing consciousness and light into the world in the ways that I've learned and experienced. So where could I continue to hear and learn from the work that you're doing?
I have a quick response to that. Thank you so much. The Native American Academy, which we are all a part of, has a wonderful website filled with lots of resources and articles and information. And also Nancy and David's Institute, the Indigenous Education Institute, has just so many wonderful resources and information. If you haven't read Greg Cajete's extraordinary books, they're just filled with so much wisdom. Participate and follow the Buffalo Treaty work that Leroy and Amethyst have been leading, that is so powerful in the Northern Plains, both in US and Canada. So there are many activities, there's groups, nonprofits, that are working in this area. So that's a good start. Given COVID, we're not meeting in person anymore like we used to. And that's really where, the proof is in the pudding, or the rubber meets the road, or all those things. That's where it gets extra juicy, but this is good. We're going to do Zoom for now. And thank you for your good work and being an artist, and your interest in supporting this movement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You left Cultural Conservancy out.
Yes, of course, my own one. Yes, Cultural Conservancy, nativeland.org, and our Native Seed podcast. Yes, the Native Seed podcast at nativeland.org. Please
and what
check
we
out
will do this coming week, we'll make sure to get on Sutra, which is the message board for this Zoom meeting. We'll be sure to get as many of those links onto Sutra as possible so people can reference them.
Thank you, Carol. Next, we'll go to Alan.
Thank you very much for an amazing dialogue. My question is, which I'd love to hear your answer to this question, is imagining somebody that spent all their life in a city. If that person was to ask you, what is land? What would your answer be? Thank you.
Anyone? Greg, do you want to answer?
Oh, that's such a huge question. What is land? What is land? Land is who you are. It's in your blood. It's in your cells. It's in every part of your being. It's that place that that you have your memories tied to. For some people, the land can be a place in your imagination. For others, it's a physical place, a place that you have your roots in, very much like a tree has been rooted and is connected to a place. Land is a metaphor for that place that Indian people talk about, as Simon Ortiz, my good friend, often says, that it is that place that that holds your life and your memory, and really is the place that you were conceived from, that resonates throughout your body, throughout your cell. It can be all of those things. So land is just a it can be at its broadest level more than the places that you've visited. It's the place that grounds you. It's that thing that grounds you. But land is also a physical place for Native people that holds their memories, holds their history, is their lifeblood, is their light. So some of the others have their amethyst, and David also raised their hands.
David.
I think for me, it's always helpful to go back to
And amethyst.
language that I was raised with. Land, we say Keya for land. Ke, Ke is the moccasin or the shoe. And Ya is underneath that moccasin. And how it's talked about is when you go about walking on your land, you leave footprints there, and so if you go out and use the land that you live on, it goes out 2 miles this way, 3 miles this way, that would be considered your land connected to your footprint. And so it's like a personal thing that's connected. Okay, then, and underneath that moccasin, it connects to the earth, that connects you to Mother Earth. That's how it's thought about. And so you are the essence of Mother Earth. So every time you make a step, you're making these connections over and over. And so you are the essence, of Mother Earth. And through your footprint and through your walking, you live in that land to which you're historically connected and for which you are. And so, people always talk about, Mother Earth, and some people talk about that we are Mother Earth. So land is a part of Mother Earth, it's one and the same. Land is Mother Earth. The land doesn't, separate itself from the earth. It is Mother Earth. So it's the footprint that you makes your land. How you use the land, that's how you're connected to it. That seems to be how I hear it from the culture that I come from. And I assume it would be same for other people. I heard about some Cherokee people that I talked to some years back, and they were talking about 3 different layers on how to understand land from their perspective. So it must be a lot more, complex than just talking about land like a real estate, And it's in the native world, it's not just a piece of dirt, a pile of dirt. It's not real estate. It's not connected to money. It's much bigger than that.
Amethyst and Nancy.
I just wanted to mention that when you're in an urban situation in the city, often what I tell my friends or educators there is that usually you're living on traditional territory of a tribe, and that part of understanding that land is knowing the stories of the land and on the land. And so, and then also to come out when they can out to the reserves or join our community and see how we participate with the land. up here in Canada, where my reserve is, there's a large city called Calgary, but that's traditional Blackfoot territory. And there's many land marks there that we still go visit. And as I had mentioned, our trickster, when he was done with the teaching, he made an imprint of his body on the land. And so many of our major landmarks are different parts of his body. So Calgary in Blackfoot is Mohkinstasi, which refers to elbow, his elbow, and it is in association with the river. We have Elbow River in Calgary. And that starts to tell you the story of the land. You then understand that water was important, and to know the water in the city is to honor that water and the life that it gives. So very often there's stories, even in cities. We've even been in Calgary, and some of our sites, a Safeway was built over one of our medicine wheels, but we still go there and we do offerings of tobacco, and we do offerings to the land and say, we know what is under this asphalt. You're still there. So I think you can always participate. This idea of not knowing what land is by being in the city, I think you can enjoy it even through your gardens in the city. So, but also it is, as David said, it's that connection between yourself and the ground. And as Nobby's taught us, he made an imprint of that relationship between the body and the ground. Thank you.
Nancy.
Yeah, this was a really good question, and it's a huge, huge one, as we've all said. I just wanted to go back to something David had said about the Nebekea and tying it to the moccasin, because scientists are always asking us, what is your personal connection to the land, or your personal connection to the sky? And even if they don't know to ask, it's embedded in their consciousness as a question, because they don't always have an answer themselves, how they can relate. But in Navajo, that idea of footprint is extremely important. And the idea of a moccasin as something you wear, and your footprint with that moccasin is on the land. And so the Nebekea, that ke, is all about kinship and relationships, and everything in the moccasin. And I'm talking to you as an old moccasin maker. Everything on the moccasin has significance. And so in Navajo, the moccasin is a reddish brown color, which is like Mother Earth, and the sole is a white color, which is like Father Sky. And the sky and the earth are they're just totally connected, and so is the water. So when you talk about land, I always have to add in water and sky as well. But it's really interesting. So the buttons on a moccasin are usually silver and with some turquoise in them. Those represent stars and the light of the stars. So it's in your feet. It's going through your entire body from the feet to the sky and back down again. That's the star part. And these are all interconnected. They're not separate entities like I'm talking about them, but they are all connected. And then the thread that you use is going to have there's two different stitches that gives it its a form, and they represent lightning. So one is straight, which is straight lightning, and the other is zigzag, which is zigzag lightning. And so that is what stitches it all together. And so everything you think about in terms of the moccasin, you're wearing it, you're walking the land, it's part of you. And if you've ever been had an experience of visiting one of your own homelands or being in your homeland, and suddenly an electric like vibration goes through that land into your feet and up through your body. And I've had that several times. You know you're on the land that's your homeland. And so you're very connected in a very personal way to that land. And I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
James, who's next?
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Just before we move on, I'd just like to ask the group, as just because we're already 10 minutes past the hour, if you're happy to take 1 or 2 questions, or would you like to start closing the session? You let me know.
Yeah, let's take at least 2 more questions.
Okay, sure. Next question will go to Mary Lynn.
Thank you. This is a subject that has been with me for many decades. I grew up in Africa, and although I haven't been there for 50 years, I still consider that my land. But in the 80s, I worked in China, and I felt that same connection with the land, and I didn't really understand it. But I came back and I was reading Jomo Kenyatta's dissertation that he wrote at the London School of Economics. And this will sound very familiar to you. He said, as agriculturalists, the Kikuyu people depend entirely on the land. It supplies spiritual and mental contentment. It supplies them with the material needs of life through which spiritual and mental contentment is achieved. Contact with the soil is where the ancestors of the tribe lie buried. And this is where they live. They still live. And I realized in that moment that this is what pulls me to the land in Africa and in China. This is where the ancestors live. I felt it very strongly when we started to go to writing on stone in Alberta, before it became quite so formalized. But it's this concept, it's more than a concept, it's a feeling that you pull out of the land where the ancestors are known to live. And I'm so pleased to hear all of you speaking of the living ancestors. How do we spread this so that other people can really connect with that? You know, it struck me that time, which is 30, nearly 40 years ago, that in Christian Western society, hell is down there and heaven is up here. And I really think this is where a cutoff has come with the land for so many people in the West.
Mm-hmm.
David.
You know, sometimes I tell people, English, the way it's structured right now, very hard to make changes, or very hard to convince people that are raised with that language, because it's different from what we're talking about. We're talking about things that are connected, relationship, and the holisticness of all things, and English is not structured. You know, it's Cartesian based, Newtonian, and you know, they use numbers, you know, to talk about things. Numbers takes the spirituality out of things. So, you know, it's all it is number. And so very hard to do. And I always say, sometimes I say that English has to die. A new language has to develop in order to really make meaningful change. So, you know, a language that's based on reality, that all things are interconnected, and every little thing is going to affect something else. You know, you do something here, it's going to affect everything. That's how it really works. Evolution of a whole system.
Yeah.
You know, we're used to thinking by the methodology that science use. You know, you look at this affects this. You know, and so we even put equation to them. You know, you understand the cause and effect. Just do an equation, put a summary on it. It's all localized, and you know, it's, you know, and it doesn't take in, you know, a much bigger effect. You know, it doesn't take into consideration the evolutionary effect. And so that you know, we're looking at two different languages, two different ways of thinking. It's almost in the world that I was raised, in the way that I was taught, with the soil, the land, it has information. You know, we can get information out of that land. It doesn't go away. You know, that land knows about everything about us, human. The land knows that we're in trouble with the pandemic. They know. You know, the tree that grows on this land already knows that we're in trouble. The information they know. That's how Native people know about, you know, the land. You know, it's not just a piece of soil. You know, it's the land. Everything on that land is, you know, has information. But not only on the land, but also the universe has information. So if you want to learn something about yourself, go back to the universe. Go back to your ancestors. All the information is there. It's not lost. It's still there. It's I'll say this much.
Thank you very much. We were going to take one more question, James.
Yes. Well, thank you, Marilyn, for that question. We'll take next question will come from Frank.
Oh, wonderful. Appreciate. I just been flooded with so much hearing you talk and remembering. My email is called Remember 108, and it comes from my work that I've done on remembrance, the whole process of remembrance, and just brought up so much for me to some of my native roots, but also unconsciously how I stimulated my dialogue with the land by playing the flutes. I play all kinds of native flutes, shakuhachi from Japan, steel flutes into the canyons all through the Southwest. And I was always wondering, why do I do this? But it's a way of starting a dialogue with the land. It's a way for the land to talk back to me and tell me. And then I also compose music with synthesizers, pipe organs, and gongs and bells to stimulate the sounds of the creation of those canyons. Not realizing, talk about stories. Look how old those stories are. They're millions and billions of years old. The land is formed by water and wind and volcanoes and all these things. So it's just brought up a flood of me, what I've been doing, the great things that I've been re-erecting. So it's been very moving for me to hear you all speak from the native traditions and how I feel so drawn. I have to go there at least twice a year. I live near Chicago, and I have to go at least twice a year to the Southwest because that really stimulates my remembrances of my origins. And I've also been doing a lot of death work with people. And to me, death is really the gateway to our reconnection to that goes past that early memory of the wounding that we all feel separated from our ancestors, and we feel separated from the origins of the universe, that we're all still really connected, but we get lost in this fog and this trance of thinking we're separate. We are not separate. And so to me, death is to be celebrated because it's a way to get back and reconnected to our original sources. So I really appreciate all the work you all have been doing, and I thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think our time, we've gone over our time slot for the dialogue. I know, as is usually the case at dialogues in person that we've held in the past, yes, and the dialogues, you know, bring out all these different thoughts and so forth. And as is the case with dialogues, there's no agenda, there's no motions or resolutions to be passed and so forth. It's what each of us take from the dialogue and how we want to deal with all the information, all the teachings, all the knowledge that came from the discussions and so on, how we want to use that information, how to use that knowledge. That's what the dialogue is about. We started out with the question about what would you say to your camp participants, the youth in your camp participants? What would you want them to take away from the camp at your closing circle, keeping in mind you had invited a physicist to your camp to explain certain scientific concepts and so on to your camp. And it brought us to the notion of what kind of ancestor, what kind of elder would I like to be? And associated and connected with the notion of light. What really is light all about? And when we're talking being an elder, being an ancestor, how does that connect with the notion of light? And in the discussion, we brought all the notion about the relational aspects and so on. Questions from our audience participants talking about, well, what is land? Well, as the responses from our dialogue participants, hey, land is just like mom, just like your mother. If it wasn't for my mother that actually, you know, I came from and one and the same from my mom, I wouldn't be. See, I just wouldn't be. See, hearing all the body motions, body fluids, and so forth, the noise they make, etc., when I was inside her womb, you know. Well, if you take that and apply it to the earth and us humans, hey, that's what the land is all about. And that's what our participants in the dialogue we're explaining, you know. And so we are one and the same as this earth, see. And consequently, it begs the question, I guess, what, you know, how and how should we treat our mom? See, how do we treat our mom? How should we treat our mom? See? So with those thoughts, I want to thank all of you. It was so good to see family, you know, see all of you and so forth. And I want to thank our participants for, you know, listening in. And I want to also thank the Pari Center for organizing this, and especially, you know, Lee for getting us all together and so on. Yeah, I want to thank everybody for your contributions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leroy, for that. Lee, do you have any? Do you have any closing remarks, or?
Just to thank you to all of the people that were in the dialogue circle. I really appreciate you taking the time to join in. I can't believe one way or another we've gotten together again. It's just so wonderful. And a big thank you to everyone. We've gone way over. Thank you, James, Eleanor, Jenna, everybody for being patient and staying with us throughout. So that's it for now. Thank you.
Great. Well, I mean, I'd like to extend as well my gratitude for this amazing session. It's been really meaningful and it's just been great overall. So thank you to all of our panelists, Leroy, Amethyst, Angelita, David, Greg, Melissa, Nancy, Lee, and Rose. And also thank you to everyone who participated, asking their questions. I've seen some also in the chat. Some really beautiful messages have come out, so thank you all for that. And I really do apologize for those who wanted to ask questions, but they weren't able. Just like to say, hope to see you all tomorrow for the session on changing consciousness, led by Dave Schramm, with Dr. Sandra Flanagan and Stephen Smith. And yes, thank you again, everyone, and we'll see you again soon here at the Pari Center.
James, just one last thing. Leroy has talked to us about ancestors throughout and prompted us to think and speak about ancestors. Leroy is our dialogue ancestor in the flesh with us now. So we must acknowledge that. Thank you so much, Leroy.
Thank you, Leroy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Leroy.
Rich.
Yeah.
So good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bravo, bravo, bravo.
Thank you.
So good to see you.